I've done a lot of things right when it comes to my money, but in this video, I'm going to share what my biggest financial mistake was so that you learn from me and you don't let it happen to you. In today's video, I'm going to get vulnerable and I'm going to share what I think is the biggest financial mistake I've made. And it's funny because most of the time, people think of mistakes as something that you do or that you did, like making a bad investment or something else. But this actually was something that I didn't do. And that's a story of me not buying a house. And before I get into that story, I need to make it clear that even though the housing market has skyrocketed in the past few years, we all know that reason has nothing to do with why I feel this is my biggest financial mistake. Obviously, it doesn't help that prices keep going up and up and up, and so many people are questioning whether or not they can afford to buy a house. And of course, I recognize that. But I made this mistake because of my mindset, and I'm going to explain that here in this video. So I think the best place to start is to go back a few years and look at me growing up. I grew up in a small town on the east coast of Canada. It is a university town, and I loved growing up here because it just fit who I was. Every weekend, I was watching university sports, playing every sport that I could, spending time with family, and I was outside all the time. It was great, and I'm still pretty much the same way. I also had the mindset that it didn't make sense for me to buy a house until I was married because I would think that my wife would want a say in where we lived, so I just thought that that was a good plan. To make a long story short, I graduated from high school and university where I grew up, and then I moved away for the very first time in my life where I went to live in Melbourne, Australia, and in the Caribbean in a country called St. Kitts and Nevis over 3 years. I had the time of my life in both of those places, but I made the decision to move back to Canada because I felt that I couldn't grow professionally where I was, or at least more than I already had, and I was also in a relationship, so those two decisions were what brought me back. Coming home, I was able to move back in with my parents while I looked for a place, and I have to say that housing where I live was very affordable compared to the rest of the country at least. And once I found a place, I started renting. I think the first place I was in, I was paying more to heat the house in the winter than I was my rent. It was huge and it was a very old and inefficient house to heat. And then I moved into the apartment that I currently live in, and I've been here for a few years now. My sole purpose being here in this spot is because rent is reasonable. Could it have more space? Yeah. Could it be nicer? Of course. Do I see what is my biggest financial mistake every time I look outside that window? Yeah, and I pretty much laugh every time. Flashback a few months ago, and I was driving down the road. When I glanced over, I shook my head and said, I should have bought that house. Now, this house is a bungalow. It has a garage and a nice sized lot on a relatively quiet street. And I've been in it thousands of times because my grandparents bought it when I was a kid, and they lived there up until a few years ago. In 2019, they had to sell their house. And I think this was probably the first time that my parents mentioned that it would be a good place for me to buy, but I didn't really have much money saved for a down payment, so I didn't give it much thought. And then my grandfather on my other side, he actually bought the house at 83 years old just because that's something that he does. He did some work and he sold it in 2021. And this is really when I made my mistake. When I chose to get serious about my money, I started investing, and I was investing a lot, mostly into retirement funds because that's what I have to do for my job. But I was also buying individual stocks like Tesla, Palantir, and Invisalign, and also some higher risk investments to name a few. And those have been very good to me. There were some days I would look down at my phone and I would see how much my portfolio rose, and I honestly couldn't believe it as a teacher. I was so focused on investing and following the plan that I had that this blurred my vision, and I missed out on a great opportunity to buy a good house for an affordable price in a time when housing wasn't and still isn't affordable for many people. But like I said before, the mistake has nothing to do with the current house prices, but everything to do with the fact that I missed out on a great opportunity. And that's because I was stuck in my ways. I had blinders on, so I missed out even when my family said again it would be a good place for me. I had two beliefs that kept me from buying this house. Number one, I had always thought that I'd wait until I was married to buy a house, and I wasn't married, so I didn't take it seriously. Number two, even though my financial plan of saving and investing my money was going very well, I chose not to view buying a house as part of it. And obviously, real estate can be a very good asset, and instead I saw it as a liability. So I think the lesson I'm trying to share through this experience is you need to be open to opportunities that might not be in your original plan. I don't believe in going down the what if trail about scenarios that could have happened if I bought this house. But in the end, even though I believe this is my biggest financial mistake, I don't regret it. And that's because instead of spending time moping around that house prices have gone up or feeling sorry for myself, I choose to focus on the solution. I choose to grow my business. I choose to create a powerful vision for my life that will use this mistake as a lesson for bigger and better things to come. So making this mistake could be the best thing that's ever happened to me. Time will tell, and this video means absolutely nothing if I don't learn from it.